Did Ajit Agarkar make the biggest mistake of Indian cricket by dropping Rohit Sharma from captaincy?
Of course, it comes with no surprise that after the decision of making Gill the ODI captain and dropping Rohit Sharma from captaincy, there has been a lot of discussion amongst the fans and ex-pundits about Agarkar, the Indian selector, and if he's even done a good job as being the selector of the Indian cricket team. Now, because of all of this, there has been a narrative going around, especially amongst the fans, that Agarkar hasn't been the most impressive selector so far, especially because of the picks of Surana time and again, and now dropping of Rohit Sharma as the captain. This narrative has only blown out of proportions, and this is why we've decided to see what Agarkar has done so far as the selector and to see if he actually fits the narrative. Now, before we talk about all of this, hit the subscribe button, and here's a promo from our membership. In the last 15 years, this 5 years have been the toughest period to bat in India.
Yeah, just the New Zealand series is where the New Zealand batters averaged more against spin than us.
The first time in 12 years where an opposition batters have outperformed the Indian batters playing against spin.
It's just tougher for a batter because there are bigger zones outside that Goldilocks zone that are now tougher to bat against. You just don't know what to line up for.
But it just goes to show that playing field has decreased for the Indian team in terms of having an advantage.
I think they should just play normal good cricketing wickets and they'll win matches. They have the pedigree. Ajit Agarkar took charge in July of 2023 and his first assignment came in the form of selecting India's West Indies tour team in the T20 format. This happened in August 2023. It is also important for Agarkar to be able to take up that position of head selector of the Indian cricket team because since the February of 2023 up until that August selection, this position was vacant. Firstly, looking at the test format, something that we need to look at and realize is that around the time when Agarkar took over the selection position, India was going through quite a phase in test cricket. Their batters were not performing to any degree. The likes of Rahane, Pujara and even Virat Kohli for that matter were not finding their feet for the last couple of seasons. And on the bowling front, seasoned campaigners like Umesh Yadav and Ishant Sharma were starting to be overlooked for the coming test series. All in all, up to the present day, 10 people have made their test debut under Ajit Agarkar's regime. And this is where we get into dividing it into two phases. The first is when Rahul Dravid was still the coach of the Indian side. Now, during this period, there were 6 players who made their test debut. In terms of the fast bowlers, you had Prasidh Krishna make his debut in the South Africa series and you had Akashdeep make his debut versus England at home. And on the batting front, you had the likes of Rajat Patidar, Devdutt Padikkal and also Sarfaraz Khan make their debuts in that England series. And additionally, Dhruv Jurel was picked as the wicketkeeper and given a chance because Rishabh Pant was obviously out of the scheme of things and KS Bharat also wasn't performing all that well. A hallmark of all of these selections and the people who were eventually able to make their test debut was the simple fact that all of these players were someone who came through the system of domestic cricket. They also had a lot of good performances behind their backs, and not just for their states but also for the India A setup. Even amongst these names, the one name that stands out is Rajat Patidar. He is a man who had been doing well not only in the IPL but also in domestic cricket, and so his name has definitely been thrown around in the circles. However, something worth thinking about is that at this point he was already 30 plus years of age, and since 2000 when he eventually made his test debut, he was one of only 6 Indian players to be able to make a test debut after the age of 30. And rightfully so. Here's a man who in his first class career at that point had 4000 plus runs at a decent average of 45.9. He had all of that experience and he'd also shown that he could score a lot of runs. Not only did he have 12 hundreds and 22 50s, but his performance for India A versus the England Lions just before the start of that England 2024 series was something worth noting. While he did score 111 in the first game that he played versus the England Lions, it was his second century that really caught everyone's eyes. He scored 151 of just 158 deliveries in an innings where India overall scored just 227 runs. And generally, when you're able to put in a performance of that caliber, you do knock on the doors. And this is why it was important for Ajit Agarkar to reward such a performance. Something you also need to take note of here is that this was going against a lot of the general selection patterns in Indian cricket because there's not a lot of players who get selected when they're already that senior and have not played for India before. And even with certain players who were picked in the squad like a Dhruv Jurel, for example, it was on the push and recommendation of Ajit Agarkar to Rahul Dravid and Rohit Sharma to be able to play this man and have him debut. This is also something that Rahul Dravid himself spoke about at the end of that England series, where he did say that Ajit Agarkar was able to challenge his notions around selecting young players and eventually allowing them to make their test debuts.
This is where things get a little interesting because under Gautam Gambhir, the coach, the way Agarkar went about selecting his test players wasn't the same manner in which he went about selecting players under Rahul Dravid, the coach. Because with Gambhir, the coach, Agarkar selected Nitish Kumar Reddy and Harshit Rana Surana in the squad to Australia and Sai Sudarshan and Anshul Kamboj in the squad to England. Now what's different about when Rahul Dravid was the coach is the fact that when Agarkar selected his test players, they were backed by a lot of first class performances and India A performances leading up to that series. But now with Gautam Gambhir, it almost seems like Agarkar is selecting players first of all with a lot of influence from Gambhir and Shubman Gill the captain, but more of the idea of how much potential a player has rather than his first class performances necessarily. Because if you take the examples of Nitish Kumar Reddy and Harshit Rana and look at their numbers objectively, their first class numbers before the test debut, you would think that Nitish Kumar Reddy is a bowling all-rounder with an average of 26 with the ball and 20 with the bat, and Harshit Rana is a batting all-rounder with a batting average of 42 with the bat and 24 with the ball. Now what is more interesting is if you look at Harshit Rana and remove the name and just look at the numbers, these numbers are quite impressive because he also has a bowling average of just 24. But the problem is he only had played 10 first class games. That's not even a season of Ranji Trophy. And given how much they had emphasized on the importance of how players should be playing first class cricket leading up to a series, these selections didn't really make sense at the time. And that's when we move on from the Australian Test series to the England Test series, where we saw interesting names like Sai Sudarshan and Anshul Kamboj make their debut. Sai Sudarshan became one of the only top order batters in the recent times to have an average of less than 40 in first class cricket, but to debut for the Indian team. Until his debut, he had played 41 first class matches with an average of just 39. But something else that worked in his favor is the fact that he had county experiences and had scored 100 in England. And even though a lot of people criticized this selection, on the contrary, there was someone else with a lot of experience being selected into the squad once again after almost 10 years, and that was Karun Nair. He not only had a lot of first class runs, he had played county cricket, he had runs in county cricket, and this selection was applauded. Midway through the England series, there was a forced selection with Anshul Kamboj being sent from India back to England once again. Now if you look at Anshul Kamboj's numbers, there's no reason for why he shouldn't have been selected in the first place. Because in 24 first class games, he has 79 wickets with an average of 22. Now these are impressive for a fast bowler playing first class cricket in India. And even in the tour games leading up to the series, he was by far the best bowler for the India A squad. But the problem here was he was sent back to India, he wasn't bowling a lot, and a lot of people also speculated that he wasn't the fittest and was carrying a niggle when he was sent to England. Also why we saw a lackluster performance from him.
And that is where we move to the bolder set of selections. Something that is very tough for an Indian selector, especially with the kind of superstar culture that we have established in this country. Agarkar's decision to talk to both Rohit Sharma as well as Virat Kohli on their test futures was an important conversation. At the point at which this conversation was to take place right after the BGT series, both Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli had been struggling for quite some time. And it was all but obvious that at some level, at least in terms of the batting point of view, they were starting to weigh the team down. And considering that we also had a new WTC cycle that was to come, it was important to determine what India's future in the test format would be like going forward. Unfortunately though, the manner in which this was handled, especially in the case of Rohit Sharma, was not a bed of roses. Allegedly, it was some BCCI officials who had leaked his retirement even before Rohit got the opportunity to announce the retirement on his own time. And so when it was confirmed that both Rohit as well as Virat were no longer going to be a part of that Indian test team, the next big thing was to announce the next Indian captain. This is always a big decision, especially in Indian cricket, and we know that Jasprit Bumrah before that had been able to lead the Indian squad. Owing, however, to his workload management, India had to look beyond Jasprit Bumrah, and for Ajit Agarkar to take the call to give the captaincy to a young Shubman Gill at that point in time, when especially a lot of questions are being raised not only on his leadership ability, but especially on his contributions with the bat, this became an important decision. And in retrospect, if you look at it up until now, Gill has shown that captaincy is only done good for him. Not just with the bat, but also being able to draw series 2-2 in England with a relatively inexperienced Indian squad was nothing less than an achievement.
So now when you sit back and think about how Agarkar, the head selector, has done for the Indian test team, you would think that he's done quite well. If anything, he's been able to take tough calls, and most of these calls have turned out to be good for the Indian cricket team. The only black mark here is after the change of Indian coach from Rahul Dravid to Gautam Gambhir, the pattern in which Agarkar used to select his players has changed 180 degrees. From selecting players with a lot of runs and wickets in first class setup, he's now selecting players who seems like they have a lot of potential, especially from the eyes of Gautam Gambhir and Shubman Gill. And this is also why the recent criticism towards his selection in the test team is also warranted. But there is hope that he goes back to his old patterns and select players on merit, because we have also seen that with Harshit Rana, for example, where he was selected in the Australian tour and ever since then not selected back in the Indian test team. Now going from the longest format format of the game, we now come to the shortest format of the game and one of the most successful formats for Agarkar, the head selector. The lead up to the 2024 T20 World Cup wasn't smooth sailing because until the 2023 ODI World Cup that happened in India, and even after that, the Indian T20 side neither had a coach or a captain. Rahul Dravid was done with his contract, or it seemed like he was done with, and Rohit Sharma, because of his past few performances in the T20 World Cup, wasn't looked at as the future captain until that point. After which, it almost seems like it was agreed upon that Rahul Dravid will extend his contract to the 2024 T20 World Cup and Rohit Sharma will continue as the captain. A call that was very important to take because 7 months to the T20 World Cup, we had neither a coach or a captain. And from then on, we of course went on to win the 2024 T20 World Cup. But something that was more important is the change in approach in Indian cricket team, especially in the T20 format. Because not only did we see an attacking play from Rohit Sharma, the captain, but we also saw that from the rest of the Indian team, especially with the decision taken that Virat Kohli and Rohit Sharma will open in the T20 World Cup. But right, Agarkar once again finds himself in a situation because after the successful T20 campaign, Virat Kohli, Rohit Sharma and even Ravindra Jadeja had retired. Something to note here is that this is the first time he's making a decision on the change of the Indian captain. Until that point, Hardik Pandya was almost seemed like the next captain. He had captain for the Indian team already and was the vice captain in the squad. But a decision was taken to make Suryakumar Yadav the permanent captain because of how much Hardik Pandya was an injury prone player and how much his body would break down. A decision that has worked well so far because under Suryakumar Yadav the captain, we haven't lost a single series and won the Asia Cup. Something to note here is that under Agarkar, the head coach, the Indian team saw 17 T20 debutants. But of course, we can't go away from the criticism that he will continue to get for a while until Shubman Gill is in the squad and not performing. It's the fact that Shubman Gill was forced back into the T20 squad, and not just that, and removed the one opener who finally found a spot, Sanju Samson, and had scored leading up to Asia Cup, and more than anything, automatically became the Indian vice captain.
And this is where we move to the final format, and that's ODI cricket. Now, although India don't play a lot of ODI cricket anymore, we've still seen 8 debutants under the Agarkar regime. However, most of these debuts have come on the fact that the main team needed a break after the 2023 ODI World Cup, and hence those extra players were put into the squads. The one selection that needs to be taken note of, however, is Varun Chakravarti's inclusion in the Champions Trophy squad for 2025. Knowing that the Champions Trophy was going to take place in UAE and the kind of pitches that we have on offer, and also given the fact that Varun Chakravarti was in extremely good form leading up to that Champions Trophy, it became a crucial selection and eventually paid off as Chakravarti ended up as the highest wicket taker in that tournament. And apart from this, the most recent decision that made a lot of headlines was Shubman Gill being announced the next ODI captain. Now there's a lot of chatter and mostly hatred online for Ajit Agarkar for this decision, but if you break it down logically, it makes a lot of sense. Rohit Sharma, by the time the 2027 World Cup comes around, is going to be about 40 years of age, and India don't want to be in a situation where they have to change their captain at the very last moment. Also, the simple fact that we don't play as many ODIs, in fact, leading up to the 2027 ODI World Cup, we only play 20 ODIs through the next couple of years. Keeping these things in mind and also understanding the fact that even if it's a new captain, he is going to be needing a little bit of time, this possibly was a very good selection and a bold one from Ajit Agarkar. Also, the fact that Rohit and Virat are still in the squad and can groom a young Shubman Gill to captain and lead India well in the 2027 World Cup augurs really well for this team. And also ensuring that he's rewarded the efforts of someone like a Shreyas Iyer who got vice captaincy. Now it makes sense for Shreyas Iyer to not have been promoted to captain from the point of view that he is only playing the single format, and also the fact that he is also someone who's going through a bit of a back injury stint right now. And so for India to be sure as to who wants to be leading them in 2027, this clarity was needed at this very moment.
Now apart from all of this, there are other things that you need to keep in mind with Ajit Agarkar, the head coach. Is the fact that before almost every series, he's ready to come in front of the media and answer tough questions that not a lot of head selectors would do prior to him. Not only does this give clarity to why they're selecting certain players, but even if his answers are not the best, at least he's ready to come forward and give it in front of the media. And one of the other most important decisions that they have taken is the fact that how the Indian players, if injured, they cannot go back to the IPL teams or personal coaches for rehab, and they have to present themselves in COE, that's a center of excellence, to make sure they're continuously monitored. And this is where we come to the end of the video and look at Agarkar, the head selector. As much as he's done good for Indian cricket, there has been a few hiccups that he's been able to overcome. What will be important to see is, like we talked about before, if he's able to go back to the pattern that made Indian cricket so successful. Now this has been our video. Like, share and subscribe, all that good stuff. All of our links are in the description below. Join our membership because you will see a lot of new videos and podcasts every Saturday with guests from all around the world. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.